Welcome, everyone, to Navigating Pay Transparency, and thank you for joining us today. Let me begin by introducing our team in this presentation. For introductions, my name is Christian Bell, and I'm the Director of Client Services for SOS and All Shares Company. I also have with me today Marcus Bornemar, Paid Data Platform Manager, also with All Shares. So, as you may know, for over 25 years, SOS has helped equity teams run their stock plans. Earlier this year, SOS joined forces with All Shares, a global leader in employee equity and ownership management. And this partnership now strategically accelerates our mission to be an end-to-end provider. All right, so pay transparency. Well, the pay transparency is drawing more attention than ever and driven by SEC disclosure requirements for executive pay and a growing number of state and even local laws affecting the broader workforce. For employers, especially public companies, the challenge is that the rules are evolving fast and they vary across jurisdictions, making it hard to keep up and be sure they're compliant. Today, we'll briefly review the current pay transparency landscape, discuss both the opportunities we see as well as where compensation structures break down. We'll also introduce a solution that we offer to help companies navigate these changes with more confidence and consistency. We appreciate you being here. If these issues affect your organization, we'd be glad to continue the conversation after today's session. Just reach out to me via email that we'll provide at the end of the session. So to begin with, let's look briefly at the regulatory environment shaping this conversation. At the federal level, the SEC's pay versus performance rules require public companies to disclose how executive compensation aligns with company performance, giving investors greater visibility into pay outcomes over time. At the same time, states and cities have introduced a growing patchwork of laws focused on pay transparency and pay equity across the workforce. These rules affect job postings, gathering of personal information tied to job candidates, and compensation practices for current employees. It's a lot, and each state can be very different in what they expect. Because requirements differ by location, compliance can quickly become complex for employers operating or hiring across multiple jurisdictions. States such as California, Colorado, New York, Washington, and others are creating laws, even within some cities adding their own separate requirements. Our goal today is not to cover every legal detail, but to focus on what matters most: how organizations can keep up with the change, support fair pay practices, and put the right tools in place to move forward effectively. So let's talk about impact and opportunities. As with any major change, there are both opportunities and challenges with taking actions to drive greater transparency around pay structures and policies. Let's start with the opportunities. Because regardless of what state we operate in or what specific laws apply, most of us would agree that the goal should be to have pay structures that are fair and competitive. One clear opportunity with many of these recent regulatory changes is greater transparency itself. When candidates understand the pay range for a role and the opportunity in front of them, both the company and the candidate are in a better position to make informed decisions from the beginning. This helps all-around success and really a greater chance for positive employee retention. There's also opportunity with current employees. In many organizations, pay can feel like a mystery, and employees may not fully understand how pay is determined, what drives increases, or what it takes to earn a promotion. The more clarity we can provide, the less compensation feels like an enigma. That kind of clarity also helps to build trust. Ideally, employees should have a credible belief that they're being paid fairly and in a way that is consistent with their peers and with their role within the marketplace. When that trust exists, it strengthens engagement and confidence in the organization. It also fosters loyalty. Another benefit to applying greater focus on pay transparency is operational. Standardizing compensation processes can help create efficiencies that align base pay, bonuses, equity, and other related benefits. There are many opportunities as well, but the main point is simple. More transparency and more clarity can create better decisions, greater peace of mind, and more room for employees to focus on the work itself. At the same time, with any opportunity comes a set of challenges, and it's important to acknowledge those as well. Some organizations question whether every new requirement will fully accomplish the goal of pay transparency. Others wonder whether the rules may sometimes create more unnecessary complexity than clarity. There's also concerns around administrative burden. New regulations can require added time, cost, and compliance risk, and states often try to balance better oversight with also, maintaining a business-friendly environment. And for employers with candidates in multiple locations, these laws can create confusion. Different rules in different places can make it difficult to apply practices consistently and confidently across large organizations that span across the U.S. So whether every concern proves valid or not, it's important to consider both sides. Good decisions require us to recognize the value of greater transparency while also being honest about the practical challenges that may come up. So let's think about some common goals. Of course, any laws that apply to your organization need to be understood and followed. But regardless of where you operate, there are some fundamental practices that can improve transparency, strengthen hiring and compensation practices, and build trust across the organization. This is really where we want to spend our time today. So, what are we seeing in this new regulatory environment that organizations can learn from? Well, one of the biggest trends is a greater use of pay bands in both hiring and ongoing compensation decisions. When pay bands are properly defined or designed uh, and aligned with market benchmarks, they provide strong foundation for transparency and consistency. They help define a reasonable range for each role, support better hiring decisions, and create a clear framework for an employee pay over time. The key, though, is that the pay bands can't be static. They need to be reviewed regularly to make sure they remain current, they're competitive, and relevant to the skills and competencies um, different roles require. And just as importantly, they need to be consistently enforced. Hiring or paying outside those ranges may solve a short-term staffing problem over time, but it can create, bigger challenges in the future. Even with strong pay bands in place, communication still matters. Many employees fall somewhere in the middle of the range and they need to understand, why they're there and what factors influence their current pay and what they can do to grow. Without that coaching and context, even a well-designed structures can feel unclear. That is why having a strong HR process, and also the right HR tool can be so valuable. If the structure's in place, but managers are not equipped to communicate effectively, guide pay conversations, and support quality employee reviews, much of the benefit is lost. Transparency only works when employees know how to access information and understand what it all means. Another important practice is conducting regular reviews of employee compensation against those pay bands. These create regular opportunity to identify gaps, spot outliers, and build a plan to address issues before they become larger problems. Finally, greater alignment through communication and decision making across HR and various internal departments related to hiring and pay decisions is essential. Compensation policies only work when they're applied consistently. That means HR leaders and hiring managers all need to be working with the same philosophy, the same guidelines, and the same expectations. So while the legal landscape may continue to evolve, these core practices remain highly effective. If organizations can establish clear pay structures, communicate well, review pay regularly, and stay aligned internally, they will be much stronger in position to navigate change and build trust in the same time. So let's think about evaluating pay gaps. As we think about where compensation structures can break down, one of the most important shifts is to evaluate pay through total rewards perspective, not just by looking at base salary alone. There is so much more. In many organizations, salary is only one part of the employee compensation. Bonus opportunities, equity awards, health benefits, 401k, and other rewards all contribute to how employees experience compensation. So if we're trying to identify pay gaps or issues with paying employees fairly or consistently, we need to look at as much of the total picture as possible. The first area to consider is the pay bands themselves. Do they have them in place? Are they clear based on job titles, skills, responsibilities, with a realistic lower, middle, and upper range? Pay should align to the role, responsibilities, and expectations tied to each job in the organization. Second, have you or your organization been able to properly benchmark your compensation to the market? Compensation decisions are only as strong as the information behind them. If benchmarks are outdated, organizations can end up making pay decisions based on conditions that are no longer reflect the labor market. Third, do you have a view of your company's compensation plan that looks at total compensation? It's important to take a more holistic look at the composite picture and then model outcomes before you start making any consequential changes to your plan. Next, after the prior work has been completed, you want to stay current. Look for any shifts or changes that need to be addressed and apply consistent methods for making corrections. Remember, the goal is to build a more complete and proactive view of the compensation, one that considers the full total rewards package, supports better decisions, and helps the organization manage pay in a way that is both fair and sustainable over time. So now let's look at some strategic levers. Here we're focusing on how organizations can make smarter and more consistent compensation decisions. Through peer group analysis, role mapping, and market normalization, you can do just that. So first, let's talk about peer group analysis. This just simply means using compensation data from comparable companies or organizations, peer groups, to help guide pay decisions. The goal is to understand how your organization compares to the market. For example, are we paying competitively? Are our salary ranges aligned with similar organizations? Are we positioned to attract and retain talent effectively? In a recent Forbes article, it stated, according to a new Express Employment Professionals Harris Poll survey, the average cost of employee turnover has climbed to $45,236, up nearly $10,000 from $36,723 a year earlier. And you and I both know losing key talent is bad on a lot of levels. So rather than making compensation decisions in isolation, peer group analysis allows leaders to use real market data to make informed and strategic decisions. Next is role mapping. This is a critical part of ensuring compensation comparisons are accurate. And role mapping just means aligning internal job titles and positions to standardized market roles. In other words, job titles may differ across organizations, but the responsibilities, the skills, and experience required may actually be very similar. For example, one company may use the title recruiter, while another uses talent acquisition specialist. Another might be account executive, where another company uses the term sales executive. So even though the titles are different, the work being performed is essentially the same. So the purpose of role mapping is just to make sure that we're comparing like roles when evaluating compensation. Without the steps, organizations risk benchmarking jobs incorrectly, which can lead to making bad pay decisions. And finally, ensure you can standardize compensation data across different organizations and markets so you can compare information on an equal basis. All of this creates a much clearer and more consistent view of compensation data worldwide and helps you or your organization to make better pay decisions. All right, let's talk about the All Shares data platform. Um, Here, I just want to highlight how AllShares Pay Data Solution helps organizations perform meaningful gap analysis by comparing their internal compensation data against a robust market database. At a high level, the platform benchmarks the total compensation package, not just base salary, but also short-term incentives, bonuses, benefits, and equity. This provides organizations with much more complete understanding of how they compare to the market. One of the unique strengths of the solution is the depth of data. Many providers primarily focus on base pay, annual bonus, and sometimes equity. Our solution goes further by covering all compensation instruments, including benefits and equity programs, which creates a much more holistic view of total rewards. So if an organization needs both a broad market perspective and the ability to drill into specific areas, such as equity or benefits, this can be an extremely valuable tool. Another important aspect of this solution is that it moves beyond simply providing data points. Two key elements are contextualizing and personalizing the information for each company. In other words, the platform is designed to provide analysis and insights that help organizations make informed decisions rather than just handing over raw market data. That context becomes especially important when organizations are evaluating competitiveness, retention strategies, or pay equity initiatives. I also want to emphasize the importance of the solution's global and the local perspective, especially since many people viewing this webinar may primarily work within the U.S. market. Compensation structures vary significantly around the world, and this solution recognizes those differences. For example, in some European companies, benefits and pension structures may play a larger role in total compensation, while in the U.S., there may be greater emphasis on variable compensation or incentive pay. The platform adjusts for those regional differences and takes a more holistic approach to compensation benchmarking globally. That's important because organizations cannot apply, one-size-fits-all compensation philosophy across every country, every market. So finally, for organizations involved in executive compensation, particularly multinational companies or large-based U.S. Organizations with international subsidiaries, this solution can be especially helpful in supporting pay equity and global compensation consistency. At the same time, it's flexible enough to support smaller or lower level organizations that are looking to strengthen their compensation strategy and better understand their market position. So overall, the value of the solution comes from combining comprehensive data, strong analytics, and global market insight to help organizations make smarter and more equitable compensation decisions. So at this point, I'd like for Marcus to show us what our pay data solution looks like.
Thanks, Christian. So now you heard the strategic picture, why peer groups matter, and how it's the foundation of any credible compensation benchmark, and why getting that wrong has real consequences, especially now with transparency requirements tightening across the globe. What I want to do for the next few minutes is simply show you how this actually works in practice. I'm going to jump into the pay data platform live and benchmark a role from scratch. So you can see how the methodology Christian just describes translates into an actual workflow. And the thing I'd ask you to keep an eye on is how the platform handles peer group construction, because that's really the core of it. The data is only as good as the peer group behind it. And if the peer group doesn't reflect the company's size and industry and structure, then frankly, the output isn't going to help you make any decisions. It's just going to be noise. So let's jump in. So this is the pay data platform, and I'm going to benchmark the role of CFO. So let's select that role. So we'll start by selecting the filter and change the currency to US dollars. Then let's select the country as USA, as well as the country of residence of USA. Let's pretend we're a industrials company within the subsector within construction and equipment. So let's select engineering, electrical, distribution, fabrication. Yeah, let's say that's good for now. And let's make the peer group a bit smaller, because as you guys can see now in the background, we still have a peer group of about 44 different companies. So let's narrow it down. Pretty quickly, with a few clicks of the buttons, you can see how we went from a initial large overview of all the different CFOs of almost 1,500 different companies with that role to about 5 different companies instead within the construction and equipment development subsector. Of these 5 companies, you can see to the right of it the actual percentiles, where you can click the different buttons to see how it changes if you want to look at the median value, if you want to look at the 75th percentile or the 25th percentile. Everything is fully variable and it's able to be tailored to your needs. And below it, you can see the actual values in actual numbers. You can see everything from base pay, benefits, pension, short-term incentive, long-term incentive, and the total comp. So as Christian mentioned, you will see the full picture, not only just the base pay or the short-term incentive. You see the full picture with all of the different components split out, as well as it combined. So that's the output. So now let me show you one more thing. I'm going to run the same exercise, but against our private data set, so non-publicly disclosed compensation data. It will be the same methodology built in, same-ish filters, But what this gives you is the ability to cross-reference. You can validate your ranges against both proprietary survey data and what's actually being reported publicly. And given how much more disclosure we're seeing in the US market right now, that's becoming a real valuable layer. So first off, let's switch to the role of CFO to get the same kind of baseline. Let's open the filter plane again. Starting off, let's change the currency to something familiar, to the US dollars. And just for the fun of it, let's switch it up with the sector and choose IT and telecom. And for the country of residence, we'll select the United States once again. And with just a couple of clicks, you can see your peer group has been created based on those values. So this look will be a bit different because of disclosures. Since it's private data, we will have the main visual to be aggregates. So it's built on the 25th until the 75th percentile, but the rest of it will basically rely the same. You will not see the data in a company by company level in terms of the different compensation components, but you can still see how the 25th, the 50th, and the 75th percentile stacks up. So it's still relevant for your company as well as your analysis to see the actual values as presented by your peer group created. So that's essentially it. What the platform does is to take the methodology that should be driving every benchmarking decision and make it the default, not something you have to manually reconstruct every time. You get consistent peer groups, you get full total offering view, and you get the output that's structured enough to actually stand behind when the board or regulators ask how you set your ranges. I'll hand it back to you, Christian.
All right, appreciate that, Marcus. Thank you. Again, if anyone would like to discuss this with our team, please just reach out to me via email. I'd be happy to connect you with somebody who can answer any questions that you have or just talk through your situation. My email address is cbell@sos-team.com. That's cbell@sos-team.com. And thank you, everybody, today for joining.